Tonight, Bills legend Joe DeLamielleure is speaking about a devastating diagnosis. As we first told you last night on News 4 at 10, the former offensive lineman has been diagnosed with signs of CTE. That's a degenerative neurological condition that many scientists say is a direct result of repeated head trauma. Now, new research is shedding light on some of the first symptoms a patient might experience. Emily Guggenmuss kicks off our coverage tonight with more. Emily?
Diana, up until recently, the only way to diagnose CTE was if someone had died. But now treatment may be possible for players like Joe D, who says in the past few years, he started to show signs of the disease, like not being able to sleep and feeling paranoid. Former Buffalo Bill and Pro Football Hall of Famer Joe DeLamielleure says players can anticipate certain injuries from the game.
You knew you could break your leg, you knew you could tear your knee up, but nobody back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s knew that you're going to get brain damage from playing football.
But brain damage is something he says he's living with. Up until now, CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy, was only tested on people who've died. It's a degenerative condition that scientists say is caused by repeated head trauma and is linked to depression and dementia. Joe D was one of 3 former NFL football players, along with Tony Dorsett and Leonard Marshall, who were recently tested at UCLA.
I wanted to be the first one to do it, and I was.
He's been diagnosed with CTE.
If you've suffered a concussion, you don't put a guy back in the ball game.
But it wasn't always that way.
When we played, they weren't called concussions. They were called, you got dinged.
Retired Buffalo Bill Ed Rutkowski says he probably suffered 3 or 4 concussions on the field during the 60s. He hasn't shown any symptoms of CTE, but says a lot of guys, like the linemen, had hits to the head day in and day out.
We're finally realizing that these things are very serious. Previously, we used to kid and joke about it. When you were in a game, you forgot about how many times somebody scored and you were still playing.
Jody says the rules have changed to make the game safer. He just hopes the NFL will take care of its retired players.
But for the guys who made this league what it is today are not being taken care of. We have no health care. We have sub-poverty pensions and no health care. And that's not fair to our families.
And scientists at Boston University have studied 54 brains of NFL players who died. 52 of them had CTE. Reporting live, Emily Guggenmuss, News 4 at 5:30.
Well, Dr. Peter Ostrow is here now to give us a little more insight into this condition. Dr. Ostrow, how reliable is this test? How do we know that Joe D has this?
Well, the test seems quite believable. We first learned what happens by doing autopsies. Here's the brain of another former NFL player. The brown areas are deposits of an abnormal protein called tau that accumulates in the brain in CTE. Now, a PET scan can locate tau protein in the brain of a living person. And as you see in the scans here on the right, 2 former NFL players have tau in their brains in the same location as we saw in the autopsy of a CTE patient. That's pretty convincing. I think the test is accurate.
Okay, so if we know now when someone is alive that they have this condition, will it be possible to treat it?
Well, that's certainly the hope. If we can diagnose something earlier, we might come up with treatments and then test them and be able to evaluate the results. And we're not just talking about football. The first profession with a disorder that was caused by blows to the head was boxing. And it was called dementia pugilistica. And some of the boxers also developed Parkinson's disease, and athletes in contact sports also have a very high rate of Lou Gehrig's disease. Okay. So degenerative illnesses are fostered by contact sports.
There's a lot going on here. Okay, so Joe D can't go back in time and not play football, but there are a lot of parents out there with children who are playing. What do you say to them?
A lot of parents will be making a tough decision about letting their kids play, but even without contact sports, kids are likely to bump their heads and get concussions. And a developing brain is vulnerable. So when there's a concussion, what all parents and coaches should do is keep a child from returning to playing or practicing until the symptoms are completely gone. And recuperating after a severe blow to the head includes resting the brain. A kid who's recovering from a concussion is not in shape to do much reading or schoolwork or watch TV or play video games. That's going to be a challenge for parents, okay? But we have to do it.
It's important. Really rest the brain. Good advice. Thank you for your insight, Doctor.